I was sitting on the 4 train when my son called. "Ma, listen, I'm flying out to Paris tomorrow. I sold your Brooklyn brownstone and your jewelry. Needed the money. Don't wait up." Then silence. No room for a heartbeat. Just the ugly shudder of wheels against track and the overhead voice calling out, "Fulton Street. Stand clear of the closing doors." A guy in a Yankees cap glanced at me, then back at his phone. Nobody noticed that my whole life had just been rerouted without my permission. 51 years of being his mother, of measuring rice with the palm of my hand, of taking double shifts in a hospital cafeteria so that boy could have cleats, a trumpet, braces, tutors, whatever might lift him a rung higher. He tossed me like yesterday's takeout, and the worst part was the way his voice made it sound like weather. I stood, collected, because that's what you do when the floor becomes water. You plant your feet and find the rail. Across from me, a little girl in pink headphones ate orange slices out of a baggie. The smell transported me to 100 church basement Sundays at Mount Zion, children's choirs in white gloves, my boy, my Jordan, standing on a folding chair to hit the high note. He used to cling to me with sticky fingers, the whole world soft in his cheeks. Now he was selling the walls that kept that softness safe. My building on St. James, brick the color of cinnamon, windows that sweated in the summer and rattled in February wind, a brownstone that knew my name, where the stoop had learned the shape of my hips and gossip, where Miss Loretta from 2 doors down would wave a fan like a slow gospel and whisper, "God's not finished, Celeste." I didn't know God's schedule, but I knew mine. The doors hissed. I got off at Nevin's. In the station mirror, I saw a face I recognized and didn't. Cheekbones my mother said could cut paper. Hair threaded with silver I refused to dye. My uniform, navy scrubs, still creased from the dryer. The name badge, Celeste G. People think the G stands for good. It never did. I put my phone in my pocket and let my hands do what seasoned hands do. Find the list in my head and start crossing off. First, I called the bank. Second, I called a lawyer. Third, I called nobody else. You don't call the church ladies until the pot is already on simmer. You don't call Miss Loretta unless you want the entire block to sing it back to you half a step higher. And you don't call Jordan. You move. Outside, Dean Street smelled like rain and hot pretzels. A delivery bike shot past, dragging wind. Construction tarps snapped like flags. The brownstone sat where it always sat. 3 stories, iron railings like eyelashes. The stoop wearing a thin dust of city on its shoulders. The for sale sign mocked me from the gate. Neat black letters, a phone number with a smug little logo, a red scarf scribble pretending to be a skyline. It wasn't there yesterday. My stomach hardened. New York teaches you that things shift 1 inch while you blink, and those inches matter. The inch that moves a bus mirror, the inch that loses a wallet, the inch that makes a boy you raised say he's already sold your life without blinking. The front door still knew my key. That relief almost broke me. Inside, the air held the faint sweetness of Murphy oil soap. Someone, meaning Jordan, had moved things. The living room couch faced the wrong way like it was in trouble. My mother's framed cross-stitch, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," leaned against a box labeled Misk. The piano stood open. Small hammer felt exposed, throat bare. I closed the lid like I was covering a child. I counted picture hooks left in the wall. Tiny metal teeth, 6 of them, biting nothing. A draft whispered from the hallway. My mind separated into lanes. 1 lane crying, 1 lane calculating. The calculating lane won. I boiled water, because that's the first step of a lot of things. Tea, pasta, stirring your soul. As it rattled, I checked drawers. Papers were thinner, envelopes gone. The file box with mortgage records sat lighter. The deed? Not there. The will? Still there. I smiled. Folks think will papers are the treasure. They're wrong. I lifted the rug in the dining room. The Persian I bought secondhand from an estate sale in Park Slope, back when Jordan was 10, and thought ketchup counted as a vegetable. The hatch was still invisible to anyone who didn't know where to press. I pressed. It gave, grudging, like an old aunt asked to dance. Beneath, the narrow ladder. I didn't climb down yet. 1 careful step at a time, Celeste. I set my tea on a coaster Jordan made in 3rd grade. Clay still crooked, thumbprint in one corner. He used to say, "It's for your famous coffee, Ma." We were never famous. We were stubborn. The phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Open house on Sunday. Cash buyers only." I breathed through my nose like a bull not in the mood to be a metaphor. If they thought they could parade strangers through my story, they had another thing coming. The kettle clicked off. I let the silence swallow the whistle. Memory swept in the way it does when a room is too neat. The first night I held the keys. The second-hand crib by the window. The winter where the pipes froze and I lit candles to warm the room, and swore I'd never see my breath indoors again. The landlord across the street who wanted cash in envelopes and thought a single mother wouldn't read fine print. I did. I always did. Only this time, the villain wore my son's laugh. I slid my palm along the banister, wood polished to a gospel hum. The basement waited like a secret. "Not yet," I told it out loud. "New York will label you crazy if you talk to a building. New York also understands." I took out a notepad from the junk drawer. Wrote, "Call recorder, pull deed, check LLC, find agent in red scarf." I put a star by that last one. People who sell your life in a hurry always wear a signature. It helps them feel like they are someone. It helps me find them. By the time the tea went lukewarm, I had opened every closet, counted every disappointment. The jewelry box was gone from my bedroom. I saw the pale square its absence left on the dresser like a ghost's shadow. He didn't take the church hat with the blue feather. He didn't take the shoebox of kindergarten art. He took what could be fenced. That stung less than you might think. The box had a false bottom anyway. The good pieces were elsewhere, and the real wealth never sparkled. Only then did I kneel and lift the hatch fully, cool air rising like a secret. I climbed down into the crawl space, felt the boards, traced the edges until my fingers found the steel. My safe, my real heart, sat where it had slept for 21 years, bolted to the bones of the house. Jordan sold my brownstone, but he didn't sell this. He didn't even know it existed. The dial waited, patient, like a friend who knows you arrive when you're ready. I rested my forehead against the cold metal and whispered the old code. The date the fire took my mother's kitchen. The day I promised myself I'd never be helpless again. The tumblers rolled. It opened with a sound that always felt to me like prayer. The night after Jordan's call, I didn't sleep. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling fan circling lazy above me, creaking on every turn like it was keeping count of my thoughts. Outside, Brooklyn hummed the way it always does. Sirens weaving in and out of each other. A dog barking 2 blocks away. Somebody laughing too loud near the bodega at midnight. This city never sleeps, and that night neither did I. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. "I sold your brownstone. I sold your jewelry. Don't wait up." He said it like an afterthought, like telling me he was out of milk, and yet it had the weight of a guillotine dropping on my neck. My chest felt heavy, but underneath the ache, there was something sharper rising. I wasn't just hurt, I was angry. I raised that boy on my back. I walked him past corners I knew were poisoned, past men with hands in pockets that hid knives and powders. I begged the universe to keep him clean, to keep him focused, and I worked every double I could to make sure his world was bigger than a block radius. And now here he was, grown, educated, standing on his own 2 feet, using that same strength I gave him to sell the ground from under mine. But what Jordan didn't understand was that this house was more than bricks. This house was survival. This house was leverage. This house was the one card I had left in a city that eats people alive. At dawn, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of instant coffee and the notepad I'd pulled out the night before. The letters stared back at me. Call recorder. Pull deed. Check LLC. Find agent in red scarf. That was my war map. And the more I looked at it, the more a plan started forming like fog thickening over the East River. I wasn't powerless. Jordan thought I was some tired old mother who wouldn't know where to start. But he forgot who raised him. He forgot I was the one who taught him how to read contracts, how to spot the lie in a handshake, how to survive a world that doesn't hand out mercy. By 7, I was dressed, out the door, and heading toward downtown Brooklyn. The clerk's office opened at 8, and I intended to be there before the line of landlords and contractors with questions about permits. The air was sharp, that early morning fall chill that tells you winter is already breathing down your neck. I walked fast, head high, ignoring the ache in my knees. The street smelled like roasted nuts from the corner vendor and wet concrete, and for a moment, I almost felt normal, like I was just another woman heading to work. But then I saw the reflection of myself in a storefront window, and I remembered. My son had declared war on me. Inside the clerk's office, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the floor tiles were scuffed from years of shoes dragging across them. A young man behind the glass window barely looked at me when he asked, "Property address?" I slid the paper with my brownstone's details under the slot. He typed, slow like molasses, chewing on a pen cap, eyes flicking to his phone when it buzzed. Finally, he turned the monitor so I could see. My heart tightened. The deed wasn't in my name anymore. It had been transferred 3 weeks ago to a company with 3 meaningless letters, JRM LLC. "Do you have a contact for this?" I asked, my voice even. "Just what's listed," he said, pointing at a P.O. box number and an email address that looked like it had been made 5 minutes before someone needed it. JRM, my son's initials, Jordan Malik Robinson. He wasn't even clever about it. That was the kind of arrogance that made me want to laugh and scream at the same time. He thought putting his name behind a set of letters would keep me from pulling the string, but I'd spent half my life pulling strings that didn't want to be pulled. I left the office with a copy of the transfer in my purse. My hands shook, not from fear, but from fury that wanted to climb out of me like fire. On Court Street, I stopped at a bench, sat down, and pulled out my phone. I scrolled back through Jordan's last messages, looking for patterns. Calls at odd hours, excuses about needing money, the sudden obsession with opportunities in Europe. It lined up too neatly. He wasn't doing this alone. Someone was in his ear, whispering promises, pushing him into corners. My boy was selfish. Yes, but he wasn't this reckless without a shadow standing behind him. I closed my eyes and pictured the for sale sign with that red scarf logo. That was my next step. Realtors don't work in a vacuum. They gossip, they brag, and they leave trails. I planned to find out who wore that red scarf and why they thought they could walk into my life and scribble me out of it. As the day stretched, I walked the streets, asking small questions to the shop owners who had been around long enough to notice changes. Mr. Lee at the laundromat told me he saw a woman in a bright red scarf taking pictures on my stoop just last week, early morning, when most of the block was still half asleep. Miss Loretta confirmed it too. She said the woman had heels too high for Brooklyn sidewalks, and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. That was all I needed. I wrote it down. Every scrap mattered. By the time the sun began to sink behind the skyline, I returned home. I stood at my stoop and looked up at the brownstone, the orange glow of dusk hitting its windows, and I swore to myself that nobody, not my son, not a stranger in a red scarf, not some shadow LLC, was going to erase me from these walls. The brownstone had secrets Jordan didn't even dream about, and if he thought he could just snatch it and vanish to Paris, he had no idea what storm was already brewing in Brooklyn. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and paused. The air smelled wrong, not the usual lemon cleaner and dust. Something sharper, like men's cologne faint in the hall. I held my breath, listening. The house was quiet, but not empty. I could feel it. A floorboard creaked upstairs, and my pulse leapt into my throat. Someone was here, in my home, already moving through the rooms I built with my life, and that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about survival. I didn't call the police because this house taught me early that alarms invite strangers who take notes and ask questions with pens that leak your business onto forms you never see again. And besides, I knew the language of my floors the way some people know hymns. The third board from the top of the staircase whines like a hungry cat if you step on the left side, but if you slide your heel along the molding and kiss the right edge, it keeps your secret. I took the skillet from the stove, held it low like a purse, and breathed through my nose until my heart learned the tempo of the refrigerator hum. When I was 19 and newly here, this brownstone lifted me out of a basement sublet that smelled like damp newspaper and boiled cabbage. Back then, the walls were scarred, and the roof leaked snow melt straight into a bucket I emptied every hour with a laugh I pretended didn't sound scared. I bought this place when nobody respectable wanted it, when the stoop was a chessboard for men who never lost because they never finished a game. I painted, scraped, mended, saved, and the house learned my footsteps the way I learned its size. So when that upstairs creak came again, 2 soft notes and a pause, I knew the intruder had reached the hallway outside the room where Jordan kept his trophies. He never took them when he moved out. He said the metal felt cheap in his grown-up hands. I said nothing, but I dusted those little gold boys anyway, because they were proof of a time when he wanted to win at something that didn't hurt anyone. I stepped onto the first stair with my weight spread across the banister, the skillet a dark moon in my grip. The hallway light upstairs clicked on. That arrogance helped me. A careful thief moves in the dark. A stupid one thinks a bulb makes him invisible. The scent of cologne sharpened into a brand I half recognized from a sample the perfume lady waved at me in Macy's. It was new money cologne, something with a name like Valor or Empire that tastes like nickel in the back of your throat. I reached the landing and listened. A drawer slid open. A zipper. A soft chuckle, like a man congratulating himself on a good guess. "Put it down," I said, calm enough to make even me believe I wasn't holding a weapon. My voice filled the hallway in that way old houses have, bouncing right back to the mouth that made it. He froze for a beat, then turned with a smile that tried to sell me a future I hadn't asked for. He was mid-30s, smooth fade, leather jacket too tight in the arms, a beard cut sharper than his eyes. The red scarf around his neck made my stomach drop and rise at the same time. Not a woman. A man in the red signature, like a franchise uniform. He lifted his hand slowly, palms out. "Ms. Grant," he said, and the fact that he knew my name made my skin prickle. "I'm here to take detailed photos for the listing. Your son confirmed access. Then your son set you up," I said, not blinking. Because I didn't. I watched his pupils for the lie. And there it was, a tiny flutter like a curtain moving when a bus passes. He gestured toward the doorway he'd been in. "I'm just doing my job. The market moves fast. Cash buyers want walkthroughs by Friday. If we wait, you lose 6 figures to buyer fatigue." He said it like a weather report. Rain at noon, hail at 2, betrayal all day. I took one step closer so he could see the cast iron catching the hallway light. He noticed. The smile thinned. "Here's what you're going to do," I said, as if I were discussing a recipe. "You're going to delete any photos you took inside my home. You're going to walk out that door and tell your boss in the red scarf that Celeste Grant will be present at all future showings. And you're going to give me the name of the buyer you promised a first look." He laughed then, a short bark that told me he'd been told to laugh at women like me. "Ma'am, that's not how this works. Son, I was a cafeteria manager at Kings County for 28 years. I fed 300 people twice a day with one broken oven and a line cook who hid whiskey in the dry storage. Everything works the way I say it works if I'm the one holding the skillet." I raised it a fraction for punctuation. He swallowed, eyes dropping to the heavy iron, then to my face, recalibrating the math of what kind of woman I might be. "Fine," he said, reaching into his pocket with exaggerated slowness and producing his phone. "You can watch." He opened the gallery. There were 12 shots, quick and careless. The living room from the doorway, the fireplace, the banister, the window light that made even dust look nostalgic. And one photo he shouldn't have taken because it wasn't a room at all. The corner of the dining room rug lifted just enough to show an edge that wasn't floor. He had seen me lift it last night? No, the timestamp was 10 minutes ago. I kept my face still, but my pulse beat hard at my throat. He had been studying more than light. "Delete," I said. He did, one by one, no flinch, no hesitation. That meant there were cloud backups running, or a partner outside. Men like him didn't trust their own thumbs. When the last thumbnail vanished, he held the phone up like a trophy he wanted a sticker for. "Satisfied?" "Almost," I said. "Buyer's name." He spread his hands. "There are several. Pick the one who wants to wire cash fast," I said. "The one whose assistant signs everything." He went still again, that same recalculation moving behind his eyes. He had one of those. They always do when speed matters more than history. He licked his lips, then said, "Lenox Avenue Capital." The words tasted like coin in my mouth. Harlem money, uptown polish, downtown hunger. I nodded like it meant nothing. "You're going to leave now," I said. "Every showing goes through me. If you come back with a locksmith, I'll be here with a camera and a pastor. Choose which headline you prefer." He almost smirked at that. He recognized the power of shame in church clothes. He edged past me, sideways, hands still visible. At the top of the stairs he paused, like he wanted to say something more. Threat, warning, apology, who knows. But the skillet told him the conversation was already over. He went down. When the front door shut, I didn't breathe for a count of 10. Then I walked back into the room he'd been raiding. Jordan's trophies gleamed dully on the bookshelf, tin men frozen mid-sprint. The third drawer of the desk was open. Inside, a pile of old team photos, a cracked plastic whistle, and an envelope with my name in Jordan's handwriting, from when he was 12, and wrote like he was trying not to bruise the paper. I slipped it into my pocket without opening it. I'd read it later when my hands weren't shaking. I knelt at the rug, smoothed it flat. The edge he'd lifted looked untouched. Good. He hadn't found the latch, just the hint of it. Even hints are dangerous when passed to the right mouth. I stood, closed the drawer, and felt the house do that thing it does when it approves. Just a temperature change, a small settling of weight, like a grandmother adjusting a shawl. I'm on it, I told the walls. The house didn't answer, but the quiet went softer. I had a name now. Lenox Avenue Capital. And a uniform. The red scarf. And a threat. An open house without me. The path forward lit itself like street lamps waking one by one down St. James Place. Tomorrow, I'd find the realtor with the red scarf, who thought she could sell my story to strangers. Tonight, I checked every lock, every window, and slid the skillet under the bed like a talisman. When sleep finally came, it tasted like iron and old promises, and the house that raised me kept. The morning cracked open with rain tapping against the windows, like someone testing a lock they didn't deserve to touch. I woke before the alarm, before the sun even thought about lifting its head, because my mind had been racing laps all night. The skillet still sat under the bed, and when I reached for my shoes, I nudged it with my toes just to feel the weight of reassurance. I moved through the kitchen slow, put on water for coffee, and opened the envelope I'd found in Jordan's drawer the night before. His 12-year-old handwriting curled across the paper like it was trying to hold on to something. To Mom. If you find this, I'm sorry I ever make you sad. I promise I'll buy you a castle one day so you never have to work again. I pressed the paper to my chest until the sting in my eyes blurred the words, and then I folded it back neatly and slipped it into my wallet. My boy once dreamed of castles. Now he was selling the walls that gave him a bed. By 8 a.m., I was standing in the lobby of a glass tower on Madison Avenue, holding the copy of the deed transfer and pretending I belonged there. Security guards in black suits scanned badges and barely looked at me, but I had my scrubs on, and New York has a way of ignoring women who look like they're just on their way to clean somebody else's mess. That was my cover, my uniform. The directory listed Lenox Avenue Capital, Suite 1912. My heart beat steady as I pressed the elevator button, the ride humming upward like a drum roll. Suite 1912 had frosted glass doors, a brass handle, and a reception desk, where a girl young enough to be Jordan's classmate sat scrolling her phone with nails sharp enough to draw blood from the screen. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked without lifting her eyes. "No," I said, my voice even, polite. "But tell your boss it's about JRM LLC. He'll want to see me." That got her attention. She blinked, typed something into her screen, and after a pause, she waved me toward the waiting area. Leather chairs too stiff to relax in. Magazines about markets and art auctions no one from St. James Place ever attended. I sat, folded my hands, and counted seconds. A man in a navy suit eventually appeared. Tall, silver at the temples, smile practiced but not lazy. "Ms. Grant?" he asked, like he already knew. "That's me," I said, standing but not offering a hand. His smile flickered. "I'm Charles Winters, managing director. Please, come in." His office smelled like cedar polish and ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a trophy. On his desk sat a crystal paperweight and a photo of him with the mayor at some gala, their smiles gleaming like knives. He gestured to a chair. I sat, but leaned forward, not sinking back like he wanted. "You're holding a deed that was transferred legally through JRM LLC, he began smoothly. "And I assure you everything is above board. Your son, don't say his name like you own it," I cut in. My voice was low, but it carried. "You bought stolen goods. My son can't sell what he doesn't understand. That house isn't just an asset. It's a history. It's a promise." He tilted his head, that banker's pity sliding into place. "Ms. Grant, I sympathize, but you need to understand the market. Brooklyn brownstones are prime. We move fast because if we don't, someone else will. Your son gave consent. He signed. That's what matters. No, I said, leaning closer. What matters is that JRM is a ghost LLC you cooked up to wash your hands. You think hiding behind 3 letters and a P.O. box makes you untouchable. But I know how ghosts work. They leave trails, tax records, bank wires, notaries who drink too much and talk too loud. And if you think for 1 second I'm the kind of woman who walks away quiet, you're mistaken. For the first time, his smile cracked. Just a flicker, but enough. He leaned back, tapping a pen against his crystal weight. What exactly do you want, Ms. Grant? I want my house off your books. No open houses, no buyers circling like vultures. You return the deed or I start digging. And when I dig, I don't stop until the whole block hears the story. The silence stretched. Outside the window, a crane swung steel beams over the skeleton of a new condo, the city always eating itself to build something shinier. Finally, he said, your son is in deeper than you realize. He owes people, real people. If this deal falls through, it won't be me knocking on your door. It'll be them. That landed heavy, like a fist to the gut, but I kept my face stone. Then maybe you should warn them who they're dealing with, I said, standing. Because this isn't just a brownstone, it's mine, and I'm not for sale. I walked out before he could answer, my legs trembling but my back straight. In the elevator mirror, I caught my reflection, eyes sharp, jaw tight, hair silver catching the light. I looked like a woman who had decided the war was already hers. Back on the street, the rain had thickened into a curtain, but Brooklyn was waiting, and so was the brownstone. I pulled my hood up and started walking, each step steady, because if ghosts wanted a fight, they'd just chosen the wrong house. By the time I got back to St. James Place, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining like someone had polished the whole block for a parade that never came. The brownstone stood there, damp brick breathing in the cold air, stoop glistening like black glass. I set my hand on the railing and whispered, still ours. Because sometimes you need to say things out loud so the walls remember your promise. Inside, I locked the door, bolted the latch, and sat at the kitchen table with a pen between my fingers, tapping against the deed copy I'd snatched from the clerk's office. My son was tangled with people who thought paper and ink made them owners of my life. That meant I needed locks deeper than brass and deadbolts. There's a man I know named Mercy. He's not in the phone book, not on Google, not someone you find with a flyer taped to a light pole. You find mercy by asking the right question in the wrong place, and you only ask if you're ready to owe something. I met him 15 years ago when Jordan was still in high school, and kids from down the block broke in while we were at church. They didn't take much, just a TV and some shoes, but the violation of footprints on my floors felt like a knife in the ribs. A neighbor whispered about a man who did locks. That talked back. I found Mercy in a shop off Flatbush, a doorbell that never rang, a counter piled with metal guts of locks cracked open like oysters. He gave me eyes that weighed my soul and asked, "You ready for doors that remember you?" That first time, he installed a system nobody could pick unless they knew the rhythm. 2 turns left, 1 pause, a knock against the wood, then finish. It's music, he told me, his hands moving gentle as if the steel were a baby's skin. And every house needs its own song. I never forgot that. Mercy gave my brownstone a song, and no one sang it but me. So that night, I pulled on a coat and headed back toward Flatbush. The city smelled like wet asphalt and fried food, the neon signs buzzing like insects. Mercy's shop looked closed, shutters halfway down, window dusty, but when I knocked 3 times in a rhythm only he knew, the light inside flickered on. The door creaked open, and there he was, older now, beard gone, more salt than pepper, hands still steady as stone. "Celeste?" he said, voice gravel and honey at once. "Ain't seen you in years." "You got trouble." "I got worse than trouble," I said. "I got wolves and scarves and a son who thinks he's smarter than me. I need my house sealed tighter than Fort Knox." He chuckled low. "That boy of yours always had fire. Didn't think he'd use it to burn you." "Neither did I admitted, the words bitter on my tongue. "But here we are." Mercy let me in, the shop smelling of metal shavings and oil. He pulled out a ledger, pages thick with names crossed out, codes scribbled in margins. "What you want is deeper than locks," he said, scratching at his beard. "You want a signature. Something that tells the house you're the only one allowed to breathe inside it." "I want it yesterday," I said. He nodded, grabbed a toolbox, and by the time we walked back to the brownstone, the moon was peeking out between ragged clouds. Mercy moved fast, hands sure, humming under his breath like a preacher tuning up before service. He changed the locks on every door, but more than that, he set hidden latches, triggers that clicked only if you touched them right. "Anyone tries to rush," he explained, "the house will shout at you, not with alarms, with silence, doors that don't open, keys that turn wrong, the kind of silence that makes a man nervous enough to leave." I watched him work, the house seeming to relax under his touch like it remembered him too. When he finished, he wiped his hands on a rag and looked me square in the eye. "Celeste, this ain't just about property. This is about legacy. Folks don't fight this hard for walls unless there's gold in the bones. What you hiding in there?" I didn't answer, just held his gaze until he chuckled again. All right. Don't tell me. But be careful. You put teeth in a house, someone's gonna test the bite." He left before dawn, toolbox clanking like a hymn fading down the street. I stood on the stoop, arms crossed against the cold, and watched the sky bruise from black to gray. Somewhere out there, Jordan was packing bags for Paris, thinking he'd outsmarted me. Somewhere uptown, Charles Winters was drawing lines on maps, shifting paper ghosts around to cover his tracks. And somewhere, a buyer with cash in hand was circling, waiting to snatch up my life like it was just another number in a portfolio. But the house had new teeth now, and I had Mercy's song in my pocket. When I stepped back inside, the silence wrapped around me like armor. I knew the fight was just beginning, and I whispered to the walls, "Let them come." The basement always smelled faintly of earth, even though I scrubbed those floors 100 times, painted the walls, sealed the cracks. It was the smell of history, deep and unmoving, like the bones of the city itself. That morning, after Mercy's locks sang their new song and the street outside was still wet from rain, I carried a lantern down the narrow wooden steps. My knees popped with every bend, but my hands were steady. The crawlspace hatch gave way under my palm, and the cool air rose up like a welcome. I set the lantern on the ground, its light flickering across brick and dust, and there it was, the safe, steel gray, solid, crouching like a loyal dog that had never left its post. I knelt in front of it and laid my hand against the cold surface. For years it kept my secret, uncomplaining, patient. I spun the dial, muscle memory guiding me through numbers etched into my bones. Left, right, left. Pause. The click came soft, almost polite, and the heavy door opened with a sigh. Inside, layered under cloth, papers, and an old photo album, lay the truth of who I was before I ever became Jordan's mom. The first envelope held stacks of cash, neat, unmarked, bundled with rubber bands that had long since dried and cracked. Savings, yes, but not from cafeteria wages. These were bills from another life, when I worked for men who paid in cash because banks asked too many questions. Back then, I balanced trays of food during the day and balanced books at night, moving numbers so their sins disappeared like smoke. Nobody suspected the quiet girl with braids and tired shoes was the one keeping the money clean. But I learned, and I listened, and when I walked away, I walked with knowledge tucked in my pocket. That cash wasn't mine. It was collateral. Collateral against anyone who thought I was disposable. Beneath the cash were folders, legal papers, contracts, copies of deeds not just for my brownstone, but for 2 other properties that once belonged to men who disappeared. I never touched them, never claimed them, but I held their shadows. Insurance. Because the world I walked out of doesn't let you leave unless you prove you're not a threat. And me? I made myself a vault of threats. Then there was the photo album. My hands lingered on the worn leather cover before I opened it. The first photo was me, 22, standing outside a club on Lenox Avenue in Harlem. Hair big, smile bigger, arm looped through a man named Darnell who promised me the world and almost got me killed. He ran with the kind of men who wore diamonds at Sunday brunch and pistols at Monday meetings. Darnell's gone now, buried somewhere no one speaks about. But the faces in those photos, those men are still out there, or their sons are. The past never really stays buried in this city. It just changes suits. The last layer in the safe was a box. Small, steel, heavier than it looked. I pulled it out, set it on my lap, and unlocked it with a key I wore on a chain tucked under my shirt. Inside lay jewelry, not the sparkle Jordan had stolen, not the flashy things easy to pawn. These were heirlooms, pieces handed down from my grandmother in Georgia. A ring with a cracked emerald, a silver locket with a photo of her holding my mother as a baby, earrings shaped like teardrops. They weren't worth much on paper, but they carried the weight of every woman before me. Jordan never knew they existed. I never let him. Some things a child can't be trusted to protect. I sat there in the dim light, staring at the pieces of my life spread across the floor, and the truth pressed down heavy on my chest. My son had sold a house he thought was just brick and wood, but the brownstone was my vault, my shield, my archive of everything I survived. If Winters or his buyers dug too deep, if they touched what I had buried, they wouldn't just find a deed, they'd find ghosts. And ghosts don't forgive. A sound from above jolted me. A knock, soft, deliberate. Not the random rattle of neighbors, not the creak of pipes. Someone was at the door. I closed the safe, spun the dial, and slid the rug back over the hatch before climbing the stairs. Through the peephole, I saw Miss Loretta, wrapped in her church coat, holding a pie dish against her hip. I opened the door, relief flooding me, though I knew better than to let my guard drop. "Celeste," she said, eyes scanning my face like she was reading the verses between the lines. "You all right, honey? Been seeing strange folks sniffing around your stoop. I thought I'd bring you a sweet potato pie before the devil tricks us into thinking the world ain't sweet anymore." I took the pie, warm and fragrant, and smiled. "You're an angel, Loretta." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Be careful. That boy of yours, he ain't the only one circling. I saw a car yesterday, dark windows, idling too long on this block. Ain't from here. You hear me? They watching." The pie felt heavier in my hands. "I hear you," I said. After she left, I locked the door and set the pie on the counter untouched. I stood in the quiet, listening to the house breathe, the echo of the basement still clinging to me. Jordan thought this was about money, about selling a house for cash, but it was bigger. He'd stirred waters I had kept still for decades, and now the ripples were reaching Harlem, downtown, maybe even farther. I pressed my palms flat against the counter and whispered to myself, "You woke the wrong ghosts, boy." And in the silence, I swore I heard the brownstone agree. The morning broke gray and flat, clouds pressed low like they were trying to suffocate the city. I dressed in dark jeans and a coat with deep pockets, the kind you can hide your nerves inside. The house hummed around me, the new locks Mercy had laid singing their tune when I turned the key. I whispered a promise to the walls, "I'll be back," and stepped into the chill. Today was for hunting. Today was for finding the woman in the red scarf. I started with Miss Loretta's gossip, because if anyone could track a stranger's perfume across 3 boroughs, it was her. She said the woman had been seen again 2 days ago, snapping pictures outside a brownstone on the next block, scarf wound tight like a uniform. So I walked, slow, watching every stoop, every face, until I saw the sign. The same smug logo, red scarf scrawled into a skyline. The name beneath it, St. James Realty Group. The office sat on the corner, glass door gleaming like it had nothing to hide. Inside, it smelled of new paint and ambition. Flyers lined the wall, smiling couples, polished kitchens, promises of, "Your dream home awaits." At the front desk, a young man with too much gel in his hair looked up from his laptop. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm looking for the agent with the red scarf," I said. He smirked like I'd asked for the mayor. "That would be Ms. Callahan. Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, flat, "but she'll want to see me." His smirk faltered, but he picked up the phone, whispered into it, then nodded. "She'll be right out." And then she appeared. The scarf was brighter in person, silk red wound loose around her neck like a signature. She was tall, heels clicking sharp against the tile. Lipstick matched to the scarf, hair slick and black as midnight. She smiled wide, all teeth, no warmth. "Ms. Grant," she said, my name a weapon on her tongue. "I was hoping you'd come by." I felt my stomach clench, but I didn't blink. "You've been trespassing on my property." Her laugh was smooth, trained. "Property? According to the records, that house doesn't belong to you anymore. Your son was quite cooperative, smart boy." I leaned forward, close enough to smell the citrus bite of her perfume. Don't talk about my son like you raised him. You're circling a home you don't understand. You think it's just numbers, just square footage, just brick. But that house bites back. Her smile twitched. Just a flicker, but I saw it. Every house is for sale, Ms. Grant. Some people just don't know when to let go. You could be living in Florida right now, sipping something cold by the beach. Instead, you're clinging to a block that's already half gone. I'm not some tired grandmother who needs convincing, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut the air between us. I know what you're doing. Ghost LLCs, straw buyers, cash wires that bounce between accounts faster than the ink dries. You think hiding behind initials makes you clever? I've seen men twice as slick as you disappear into concrete because they forgot who they were stealing from. Her eyes narrowed, the mask slipping for just a breath. Careful, Ms. Grant. This is business. Nothing more. No, I said, straightening. This is blood. My mother's, my grandmother's. That brownstone isn't just business. It's survival. And I'll bleed before I let you sell it to the highest bidder. The room went quiet, only the hum of the air conditioner filling the space. The young man at the desk shifted uncomfortably, pretending to read his screen. Callahan's smile returned, but tighter this time, edges sharp. You're tougher than you look, she said. But toughness doesn't stop papers from being filed. It doesn't stop buyers from circling. And it doesn't stop debt collectors from asking why your son owes them favors he can't repay. My chest tightened, but I kept my face stone. Debt collectors don't scare me. I've been collecting debts my whole life. I let the words hang there, heavy, and for the first time her eyes flickered with something like caution. I turned before she could answer, heels clicking harder than hers on the tile. Outside, the cold slapped my face, but it felt like breath, like freedom. She wanted me scared. She wanted me to feel small, erased, replaceable. But the truth was, she'd shown her hand. She knew my name, knew my house, but she didn't know me. Not yet. As I walked back down St. James Place, neighbors nodded, kids chased each other across stoops, and the house waited at the end of the block. Steady, solid, mine. I touched the railing, felt the hum of Mercy's locks, and whispered, they don't know who they're dealing with. Because this wasn't just a fight over property. It was a war over history, and I had no intention of losing. The smell hit me before I even knocked. Collard greens simmering low, cornbread in the oven, fried chicken cooling on a paper towel spread across the counter. Miss Loretta never invited folks to dinner unless she had news or a warning, and both usually came wrapped in gravy. I carried a bottle of ginger ale under my arm, the kind she liked to mix with cranberry juice, and when she opened the door, her face already told me everything. Those sharp eyes softened by worry, that head wrap tied tight like armor. Come on in, Celeste, she said, pulling me inside before I could speak. Her dining room table was already set for two, plates gleaming, napkins folded neat. She didn't waste time with small talk. She never did. Sit yourself down. Eat first, talk after. You can't fight on an empty stomach. I sat, the plate warm in front of me, but my mind was still back at that realty office with Callahan's red scarf burned into my vision. Miss Loretta piled my plate high and then folded her hands on the table. Now, she said, tell me why that woman in red has been prancing up and down this block like she owns it. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her about Jordan's call, about the deed transfer, about Winters in his glass office and Callahan in her scarf smiling like a knife. I told her about the safe in the basement, though not everything inside it. Just enough so she knew this was bigger than money. When I finished, Miss Loretta sat back, lips pursed tight, eyes burning like coals. That boy of yours, she said slowly, done tangled himself in a web he don't even see. And those people, they don't care about him. They don't care about you. They just want the house. Your house. I nodded, the food on my plate untouched, my stomach too tight for eating. I can't let them have it, Loretta. It's more than walls. It's everything. She leaned in, voice dropping low. Then you ain't fighting alone. This block remembers, Celeste. We seen you raise that boy. Seen you work 2 jobs and still show up for choir practice. Still bring sweet tea to block parties when you were bone tired. You think we'll just watch them take your home? No, honey. We fight together. Her words landed heavy, and for the first time in days I felt the weight shift just a little off my shoulders. But with it came fear, because bringing the block in meant bringing danger to their doors, and these weren't men you wanted looking too close at your neighbors. "Loretta," I said softly, "if they come after me, they won't stop at the stoop. They'll press, they'll push, they'll find anyone standing beside me." She waved a hand, dismissing the thought. "Child, this ain't the first time this block's been tested. We fought landlords in the 70s, drug boys in the 90s, and developers in the 2000s. We still here. Don't you dare underestimate the power of a community that knows its own worth." The oven dinged, and she stood, pulling out the cornbread, golden and steaming. The smell filled the room, warm and grounding. "Eat, Celeste. Tomorrow you fight. Tonight you feed your spirit." So I ate, bite after bite, and with every taste I felt my hands steady, my breath even. Loretta talked while we chewed, telling me she'd seen that same black car with tinted windows twice now, parked at the corner, engine running. Men inside didn't get out, but their eyes did. You feel it when eyes crawl your block like that. Be careful. I promised I would. When dinner was done, she pressed leftovers into my hands like armor, cornbread wrapped in foil, greens in a Tupperware. At the door, she grabbed my wrist and squeezed, her grip stronger than her years. "You're not alone," she said again, her voice fierce. "Don't you forget it." Back at my brownstone, I stood on the stoop and looked down the street. Sure enough, a dark car idled at the corner, windows up, engine purring low. I didn't flinch, didn't hurry. I unlocked my door slow and deliberate, let them watch me walk inside like a queen entering her castle. The locks clicked behind me, Mercy's song singing soft, and I whispered to the walls, "The block's with us." But even as I said it, I knew. The fight was climbing higher, pulling more people in, and the higher it climbed, the harder the fall if I lost. The letter came folded neat, slipped under my front door sometime before dawn. No envelope, no stamp, just my name scrawled across the front in ink so heavy it bled through. I found it when I stepped into the hallway, slippers on, coffee still steaming in my hand. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, notice of auction. Property to be sold at public auction, Saturday 10 a.m. Location, Brooklyn Borough Hall. Cash buyers only. Saturday, 2 days from now. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the words, heart hammering in my ears. They weren't waiting for negotiations, weren't dragging their feet like I hoped. They were coming to take my house out from under me with a gavel bang and a handshake, and once the hammer fell, it would be near impossible to undo. The smell of my coffee turned sour in my nose. I paced the kitchen, the floors creaking under my bare feet. Auction meant paperwork had already been filed, judges already paid, strings already pulled. Charles Winters wasn't just testing me. He was moving fast, betting I couldn't keep up. My son's debt had sped the clock, and now I had 48 hours to stop them or watch everything vanish. I grabbed my notepad, scribbling furiously. Find proof of fraud. Block the auction. Expose JRM. The words looked desperate, but desperation was fuel. I pulled out the deed copy from my purse, spread it on the table, and read every line like scripture. The transfer date. The signatures. Jordan's name scrawled careless like he'd signed in a rush. And beneath it, notarized by a name I didn't recognize, Ellen F. Carpenter. I froze, because I did recognize that name. Ellen had been a clerk at Kings County back when I worked there. A woman with a laugh like a horn and a habit of signing things for friends when nobody was looking. She'd been fired years ago for procedural misconduct, and now here her name was, stamped official on the transfer of my house. Fraud. Plain as day. I snatched my phone, scrolled until I found a number buried deep in old contacts. I hadn't called it in years, but when the line clicked and her gravelly voice answered, I knew luck was still with me. "Ellen, it's Celeste. I need to talk." By noon we were sitting in a diner off Flatbush, greasy tables, waitresses calling everyone baby. Ellen looked older, heavier around the middle, but her eyes were sharp. She stirred her coffee slow, watching me over the rim. "You always were stubborn, Celeste," she said. "And if you're calling me after all these years, you're in the kind of mess I try to avoid. They're auctioning my house," I said flat, "and your name's on the papers. I need to know how." She sighed, set her spoon down. Winters came to me, said it was just paperwork, just a formality, paid me to notarize without asking questions. I didn't think twice. Should have known better. That man doesn't breathe unless it makes him richer. You realize what you did? My voice cracked sharper than I meant. You put your stamp on theft. She winced, but didn't look away. Yeah, and if you push, I go down with him. You really gonna burn me too, Celeste? I leaned forward, every nerve in me tight. You think they'll protect you when the fire starts? No, they'll throw you to the wolves first. I'm offering you a choice. Stand with me now. Testify that Winters forced your hand, and maybe you walk away clean. Or stay quiet and watch your name burn in the papers next to his. She stirred her coffee again, lips pursed. The diner clattered around us. Dishes, forks, voices rising. Finally, she nodded once. Slow. All right, but you better move fast. They're not gonna wait for you. By the time I left, I had her statement scribbled on a napkin, her shaky signature at the bottom. Proof. Not enough to stop an auction outright, maybe, but enough to stall. Enough to throw mud on Winter's clean suit. I clutched that napkin like a lifeline all the way back home. When I reached the stoop, the black car was back, engine idling. This time, the window rolled down just an inch. I couldn't see the driver, just the tip of a cigarette glowing in the dim. Watching. Waiting. I stared right back, long enough for the cigarette to drop and grind out. Then the car pulled away. Slow, like a promise. Inside, I laid the napkin flat on the table beside the deed copy, beside the letter. My arsenal. My proof. The clock ticked loud on the wall, every second slicing closer to Saturday. Auction day was coming, fast as a train I couldn't outrun. But I wasn't planning to outrun it. I was planning to derail it. I never wanted to walk that stretch of Lenox again. Not after the life I left behind. Not after the things I promised myself I'd never touch twice. But desperate women keep old doors memorized. And when the city pushes you into a corner, you remember who holds the keys. I put on my coat, tucked Ellen's signed napkin deep in my wallet, and rode the 3 train uptown, heart pounding with every stop closer to Harlem. The train rocked, wheels screaming against track, and I stared at the reflection of my own face in the dark window. Silver hair pulled back, eyes sharp, mouth set. I looked like my mother when she made decisions nobody could shake. Lenox Avenue looked the same and different all at once. New cafes stood where barbershops used to buzz. Condos squeezed between brownstones like unwelcome cousins, but the rhythm of the block was still there. The music, the voices, the smell of fried fish mixing with exhaust fumes. I walked fast, head down, until I reached the storefront with the green awning, paint chipped but still hanging on. The sign above read, Saint's Pawn and Loan. Saint wasn't his real name, not even close, but that's what everyone called him because he had a way of saving people, for a price. Back in the day, when I was 22 and foolish, Saint was the one who slipped me envelopes of cash when Darnell's crowd forgot to pay me for the books I cooked. Saint was the one who told me, don't confuse loyalty with chains. And when Darnell disappeared, Saint was the one who made sure I walked away breathing. I owed him. But I also knew he liked women who could pay their debts in information, not tears. Inside, the shop smelled like dust and old wood, jewelry cases half lit, shelves stacked with guitars, watches, radios, all tagged with handwritten prices. Behind the counter sat Saint, older now, heavier, but those eyes hadn't dulled. He looked up, and when he saw me, his mouth curved slow into a smile that wasn't just welcome, but recognition. Well, well, he said, voice gravel wrapped in velvet. If it ain't Celeste Grant, thought you were smart enough never to come crawling back here. I'm not crawling, I said steady. I'm standing, and I need your help. He laughed, low and rich. That's what they all say when they walk through my door. He gestured for me to sit on the stool across the counter. Tell me. So I told him. About Jordan's betrayal. About Winters and Callahan. About the Ghost LLC. The auction in 2 days. I didn't tell him about the safe in the basement, but Saint had always been too good at reading what wasn't said. His fingers drummed against the counter, slow, deliberate. You know what you're up against, right? He finally said. Winters ain't just a suit. He's tied to men who don't like being embarrassed. You make noise. You might find yourself quieted for good. I've lived too long to be quiet, I said. They think they can erase me, sell my house like I'm already gone. But I'm still here, and I've got proof. I slid Ellen's napkin across the counter. Saint read it, eyebrows rising. Fraud, he murmured. Sloppy. Winters must be rushing. He looked up at me. This is leverage. But leverage only works if you've got a stage to pull it on. The auction, I said. He nodded. Exactly. You show up, you raise hell, you put this in front of the right eyes. But that won't stop them from trying to muscle you out afterward. You'll need backup. People who remember you're not someone to play with. I met his gaze. That's why I came here. Saint leaned back, stroking his beard, eyes half shut like he was weighing scales. Then he chuckled. You always did have fire. All right, I'll put word out. Some folks still owe me favors. They'll be at Borough Hall Saturday front row, watching. Not to fight, not unless it's needed, but enough to make Winters think twice about steamrolling you. Relief flickered through me, quick and sharp, but I didn't let it soften my face. And what do you want in return? Saint's smile widened, teeth flashing. Just a promise. When this is done, when the dust settles, you tell me the real reason you never let that house go. I can smell a secret, Celeste, and you've been guarding one for decades. I swallowed hard, the image of the safe flashing in my mind. Maybe one day, I said. He laughed again, deep and knowing. Fair enough, but be careful. You've woken old ghosts. Ghosts don't like their sleep disturbed. When I stepped back onto Lenox Avenue, the air felt heavier, the sky darker even though the sun hadn't set. I had Saint's word, Ellen's proof, and 2 days to stop the hammer from falling. But I also had enemies watching, circling closer every hour. I walked to the subway, clutching my coat tight. For the first time, I didn't feel entirely alone. But allies come with shadows, and shadows always ask for payment. Jordan finally called again, but not to apologize, not to explain. He called because he was scared. It was near midnight, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with the house dark except for one lamp. My phone buzzed, and when I saw his name, my chest squeezed so tight I thought my ribs would crack. I answered on the second ring, voice steady though my hands trembled. Jordan. His breathing was ragged, shallow. Ma, he said, voice cracked like dry wood. I don't got time to explain. I messed up. You think? I snapped, but the anger was just a cover for the flood rising inside me. You sold my house, my jewelry, my... Stop, Ma. Listen. He cut in, desperate. It ain't just Winters or that scarf woman. It's bigger. I borrowed from people you don't want to know. Harlem money. Jersey crews. They don't care about contracts. They don't care about me. They want what I promised them. And that's your house. The room spun. My stomach knotted. You promised them my brownstone? My home? Jordan, do you even understand what you've done? Silence stretched on the line, only his harsh breathing filling it. Finally, he whispered. They said it was collateral. I thought I could flip it, sell fast, pay them back before they noticed. I didn't think they'd come after you. Didn't think? I hissed, voice low and sharp. You knew what that house means. You knew it was the only thing between us and nothing, and you handed it to wolves. His voice cracked again, younger suddenly, like the boy he used to be. Ma, I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go. I thought Paris would be my way out, but they're already watching me. They know everything. They got people everywhere. The line went quiet for a breath, and then a new voice slid through, cold and smooth, male. Hello, Ms. Grant. My heart froze. Who is this? The voice chuckled, low. Let's just say I'm one of the people your son owes. And now, because family shares everything, he's made his debt your problem too. Saturday isn't just an auction. It's a deadline. If the house isn't sold and the money in our hands, your boy won't make it to Paris. He won't make it anywhere. My hand gripped the phone so tight my knuckles ached. If you touch him, the man interrupted, laughing softer this time. No, Ms. Grant. We don't touch boys like him. We let them drown in their own choices. But you're a different story. We know who you are. We know what you did on Lenox back in the day. And we know you've got things in that house worth more than the deed. Every hair on my arm stood up. They knew. Maybe not the details, but enough. The line clicked dead before I could answer. My breath rushed out, shaking. Jordan hadn't hung up. They had. and he was in their hands. I sat there frozen for a long minute, the quiet of the house pressing around me. The safe in the basement, the files, the cash, the album, all the things I swore would stay buried were calling out now, louder than ever. These men weren't chasing just the house. They were chasing the history sealed in its bones. I pushed back from the table, legs trembling, and paced the kitchen. Anger roared hotter than fear now. My son had betrayed me, yes, but he was still mine. They wanted to use him as leverage, as bait. They thought fear would fold me, but they'd forgotten I learned to stand in fear before Jordan was even born. At 2 a.m., I pulled out Saint's number from memory and dialed. He answered on the first ring, voice low. "You calling late means you need more than advice." "They've got Jordan," I said, voice clipped. "And they know about me, about Lennox. Saturday isn't just an auction, it's a test. They want me broken." Saint was silent for a beat. Then he sighed. "Then you don't show up broken. You show up bigger. You show them the woman they don't want to remember." I leaned against the counter, eyes burning. "That woman's been buried a long time." "Then dig her up," he said, "because she's the only one they respect." The line clicked off, leaving me in the heavy quiet. I looked at the walls, the stairs, the floorboards, all of it holding memories Jordan never knew. My brownstone wasn't just a house. It was armor. It was evidence. It was bait. And now it was a battlefield. The day before the auction, Winters called me himself. His voice was silk stretched tight over wire, calm, but with an edge sharp enough to cut. "Ms. Grant," he said, "we should meet. In person. No lawyers, no theatrics. Just a conversation." I almost laughed. "Conversations don't happen in your world, Mr. Winters. Deals do. Call it what you like," he replied. "But if you want to save what's left of your son, you'll come. Midtown tomorrow morning. I'll text the address." And then he hung up. The text came seconds later. A private office on the 28th floor of a glass tower on 6th Avenue. Midtown, where the rich like to play chess with people's lives. That morning, I dressed like armor. Black slacks, a crisp blouse, my mother's cracked emerald ring on my finger. Not flashy, not weak. A woman who could walk into a lion's den and not blink. The subway was crowded, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, but I stood steady, eyes fixed on the reflection in the darkened glass of the door. My face looked older, yes, but older meant harder, sharper, the kind of woman who could cut stone if she had to. The office smelled of money, polished wood, leather, glass. Winters waited behind a desk, immaculate suit, tie the color of blood, and standing by the window was Callahan, red scarf draped over her shoulders like a warning flare. She didn't smile this time. She just watched me, eyes glittering, lips pressed tight. "Ms. Grant," Winters said smoothly, rising to shake my hand. I didn't take it. I sat instead, crossing my legs, my stare fixed on him. "Where's my son?" I asked. He tilted his head, faux sympathy plastered on his face. "Alive, for now, but in debt. He owes men who don't wait. The only way to fix this is for you to cooperate. Tomorrow, the auction goes forward. Lennox Avenue Capital wins the bid. You walk away with nothing but your dignity intact." "And if I don't?" I asked, voice steady. His smile widened, but his eyes stayed cold. "Then your son pays in blood, and the past you've worked so hard to bury rises out of the ground for everyone to see." I leaned forward, elbows on the desk, locking eyes with him. "You think you're holding all the pieces, Winters, but let me remind you, chess isn't just about power, it's about patience. And I've been patient for decades." Callahan scoffed, finally speaking. "You're bluffing. You've got nothing. A tired house, a foolish son, and old stories nobody cares about." I turned to her, let my eyes narrow. "Then why are you so nervous every time you stand near me?" Her smile faltered, and I knew I'd struck something. She looked away first. I reached into my purse and slid Ellen's signed napkin across the desk. Winter's hand froze as he read it. "Fraud," I said softly. "Your notary is compromised, and that's just the beginning. Imagine what else I can dig up between now and tomorrow." For the first time, Winter's mask cracked. His jaw tightened, the smooth rhythm of his breathing breaking for just a second. He set the napkin down carefully, like it might explode. "You think you can stop the auction with this?" he asked. "I think I can stall it," I said. Long enough for the right eyes to see. Judges, reporters, maybe even buyers who don't want blood money on their hands. You rush this, Winters, and the whole thing burns. Silence filled the room, thick as smoke. Callahan shifted, biting her lip, her scarf catching the light. Winters leaned back, tapping his pen against the desk, calculating. Finally he said, "You're bold, Ms. Grant. I'll give you that. But boldness has consequences. Tomorrow, when that gavel falls, you'll see." I stood, sliding the napkin back into my purse. "Tomorrow," I said. "You'll see too." As I turned to leave, Callahan stepped closer, her voice low enough for only me to hear. "You're walking into fire, Celeste. And fire doesn't care how long you've survived." I looked her dead in the eye. Then maybe it's time they learned I don't burn easy. I walked out, my heels striking the marble floor like drumbeats. The city outside roared, taxis honking, crowds pushing, life moving fast. But inside me, everything slowed. Tomorrow wasn't just an auction. It was war, and I was ready. The night before the auction, they tried to hold an open house. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need an invitation to step into my own living room. The for sale sign outside glared at me under the streetlight, smug as a thief, and through the window I saw silhouettes moving, buyers with money burning holes in their pockets, sipping wine poured into glasses that didn't belong to them. My house, my walls, my memories, and strangers laughing like they already owned it. I waited until the crowd's voices swelled, until Callahan's sharp laugh cut through the air like broken glass. Then I pushed the door open. Mercy's locks recognized me, sang my rhythm, and clicked free. The music cut mid-note when I stepped inside. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, their smiles shrinking. Callahan froze by the fireplace, scarf glowing like a wound against her black dress. Winters stood near the piano, wine glass in hand, face tightening as if he'd swallowed poison. "Evening," I said, my voice carrying through the hush. "Welcome to my home." A murmur rippled through the room. One buyer, a man with a Rolex flashing on his wrist, chuckled nervously. I thought this was... "It's mine." I cut him off, stepping further into the room, heels clicking against hardwood. "This brownstone raised me, fed me, protected me. Every brick here knows my name, and none of you will take it." Winters moved forward, smile painted back on. "Ms. Grant, perhaps we should..." "Quiet," I snapped, sharper than I intended. The silence slammed down again. I pulled Ellen's signed napkin from my purse and held it high. "This," I said, my voice ringing, "is proof your perfect little deal is rotten. Fraud, fake signatures, ghost companies. They've stolen this house from under me, and now they're trying to wash it clean with your money. But let me tell you, blood doesn't wash off that easy." Callahan's face drained of color. She stepped forward, voice shaking with forced calm. "Buyers, don't listen to her. She's desperate. She's clinging to a past she can't afford to keep." "Past?" I barked a laugh. "This isn't just past. This is present. This is proof. You think you're buying a dream? No. You're buying a crime. You're buying into a theft. And when it unravels, your names will be tied to it. You want your reputations dragged into courtrooms, into newspapers? You want your children Googling your names and finding fraud stamped across them?" Gasps cut through the room. A woman near the back set her wine glass down with a clink. A man whispered to his partner, shaking his head. One by one the buyers shifted, unease thickening like smoke. Winter's mask cracked again, his jaw tightening, eyes narrowing into daggers. "You've made your point, Ms. Grant," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Leave. Now." But I wasn't done. I stepped closer to the center of the room, shoulders squared. "Let me tell you something about this house. My mother's prayers are in these walls. My sweat is in these floors. My son took it from me, and you..." I jabbed a finger at Winters, at Callahan. "You thought you could erase me, but I'm still here. And tomorrow, when you stand in that courthouse with your auctioneer's gavel, I'll be there too. And I won't be quiet." For a long beat, nobody moved. Then one of the buyers, a man in a sharp gray suit, cleared his throat. "I don't get involved in messy deals," he muttered, heading for the door. Another followed, then another. Within minutes, half the room was empty, the hum of voices replaced by a sour silence. Winter's face burned red. Callahan's hands clenched at her sides, You think you've won? She hissed. You've just made yourself a target. I smiled, though my heart pounded like a drum. Then aim well, because I don't miss. I turned and walked out, the night air cold against my face, my pulse hot in my veins. Behind me, I heard the door slam, voices rising in anger, threats muttered through clenched teeth. But the block was quiet, the street lamps glowing steady, the brownstone humming with pride. Tomorrow was the auction. Tomorrow was the war. But tonight, I'd taken back my ground. Saturday morning, Brooklyn Borough Hall stood tall against the gray sky, its white columns gleaming like teeth ready to bite. A crowd gathered at the steps, buyers in pressed suits, clerks shuffling papers, curious neighbors drawn by whispers that something big was about to happen. I walked up those steps slow, shoulders back, every breath steady, carrying nothing but my purse and the napkin with Ellen's signature inside. My heart thundered, but my face didn't show it. Inside, the auction room buzzed with the hum of money. Winters stood near the front, immaculate in his blood-red tie. Callahan beside him, scarf knotted tight around her neck. Jordan wasn't there. My chest ached at that, but I forced myself to focus. Rows of buyers filled the chairs, their eyes sharp, hungry. The auctioneer, a man with 2 white teeth and a gavel polished to a shine, tapped his papers. Next property, he called, voice loud and smooth. A 3-story brownstone on St. James Place, prime Brooklyn location. Opening bid, $1.5 million. Hands shot up, numbers rattled off, the gavel lifted, and that's when I stood. Stop! My voice cut through the room, sharp as glass. Heads turned, murmurs rippling. I stepped into the aisle, heels striking the floor like drum beats. This auction is illegal. Winter's face tightened. Sit down, Miss Grant. But I didn't. I pulled Ellen's napkin from my purse, held it high. This property was stolen. The deed transfer was notarized fraudulently by an employee paid off by this man, Charles Winters. Here is her confession, in her own hand. I shook the napkin, my voice rising. If you buy this house today, you're buying stolen goods, and when the courts catch up, you'll be dragged down with him. Gasps cut the air. Buyers shifted in their seats, some lowering their paddles, others whispering urgently. The auctioneer faltered, his smile slipping. Callahan's face burned pale under her scarf. Winters stood, voice booming. She's lying. A desperate woman clinging to a house she can't afford. Don't listen. Then why? I cut him off. Did half your buyers walk out of my open house last night when I told them the truth? Why do you look so nervous, Mr. Winters, if your papers are clean? The room buzzed louder now. Buyers muttering, some standing. A woman in pearls snapped her folder shut. A man leaned over to his partner, shaking his head. The auctioneer tried to regain control, tapping his gavel. Order, please, order! And then the fire alarm shrieked. The room erupted into chaos, the shrill scream bouncing off marble walls. Smoke began curling in from the back, thick, acrid, fast. People scrambled to their feet, coughing, rushing for the doors. Chairs clattered, papers flew, voices rose in panic. I froze for half a second, heart pounding, then pushed forward, determined not to lose ground in the chaos. Winters and Callahan were already moving, Winters barking orders into his phone, Callahan gripping her scarf as though it might shield her from the smoke. In the swirl of bodies, I heard a voice, weak, strained. Ma! Jordan. I spun, coughing, and saw him near the side exit, flanked by 2 men in dark coats, their hands gripping his arms. His face was pale, eyes wide, sweat dripping down his temple. Our eyes locked, and for a moment he looked like the boy who used to cling to me on stormy nights. Let him go, I shouted, pushing through the crowd, but the men pulled him tighter, dragging him toward the exit. Winters caught my eye across the room, his face twisted in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He mouthed one word, collateral. The smoke thickened, alarms blaring, bodies pressing toward the doors. I pushed harder, but by the time I reached the exit, they were gone. Just the slam of the door, the echo of boots on stone. I staggered outside with the rest of the crowd, lungs burning, tears stinging my eyes from the smoke. The air was cold, sharp, biting, but it felt like fire in my chest. Around me, buyers shouted, Clerks panicked. The auctioneer coughed into his sleeve. The fire trucks hadn't even arrived yet, but already the auction was over. Disrupted, ruined, chaos swallowing it whole. And my son was gone. I stood on the steps of Borough Hall, smoke still curling from the doorway behind me, the napkin clutched tight in my fist. The auction was broken, yes. Winters had lost his clean victory. But the cost had just doubled. Because now, it wasn't just about saving my house. It was about saving Jordan. The city never really sleeps. But that night, Brooklyn felt like it held its breath. Sirens had come and gone from Borough Hall. Fire trucks spraying water at a blaze that turned out to be smoke bombs. No flames at all. A distraction. A cover. And while the crowd coughed and scattered, Winter's men had slipped away with my son in their grip. I walked the streets for hours after, every block lit by the red and blue flashes of police cars. My body heavy with exhaustion, but my mind sharper than it had been in years. I knew where this was going to end. Not in a courthouse. Not in some glass tower on 6th Avenue. It was going to end where it began. In my house. I unlocked the brownstone with Mercy's rhythm, stepped inside, and went straight to the basement. The safe opened under my hands like it had been waiting for this moment. I pulled out the cash, the files, the photo album, the steel box with my grandmother's jewelry. Each piece was weight, history, proof. But one file I hadn't touched in years I now opened. The ledger from Darnell's crew back on Lennox. Names, dates, amounts, deals that could still bury men if anyone wanted to dig. I'd kept it because I couldn't burn it. And now, it was going to be the bait. By dawn, I had a plan. Saint had promised backup, and when I called, he answered before the first ring finished. They took him, I said simply. I know, Saint replied. Word travels faster than fire in this city. Where do you want to meet? My brownstone, I said. Tonight. Tell them to bring eyes, not guns. If I go down, I don't want blood on these walls. The day crawled. I cooked rice and beans just to keep my hands busy. The scent filling the kitchen, the way it always had when Jordan was small. My chest tightened at the memory of him scraping his plate clean, asking for seconds, grinning like the world was still kind. That boy was gone, buried under debt and arrogance, but he was still mine. And if saving him meant sacrificing everything I'd held on to, then so be it. At sunset, the black car returned, headlights slicing the block. This time, it didn't idle. It stopped right in front. 2 men stepped out, dragging Jordan between them. His face was swollen, lips split, but his eyes were alive, darting to me like a drowning man clinging to shore. Winters stepped out after them, calm, suit still perfect, as if smoke and chaos never touched him. Callahan followed, scarf wound tight, her gaze locked on me like a blade. Inside, Winters said smoothly, nodding toward the door. I opened it, led them into the living room, the house humming with tension. Saint was already there, sitting easy in my armchair, 2 other men standing behind him, quiet, broad, steady. Winters hesitated for the first time when he saw him. Saint, he said, voice tight. Charles, Saint replied, leaning back like this was just another business meeting. You making enemies in my city now? Winters's smile flickered, but he didn't answer. He turned to me instead. You have what we want. The files, the cash, hand them over, and your son walks out alive. I held up the ledger, its worn cover trembling in my hand. This is worth more than my house. It's names, Winters. Names that still have power. You want it? You'll let my son go and erase every trace of that auction. His eyes darkened. You'd give up your shield for him? I looked at Jordan, bloody and broken, but still standing. My boy. My foolish, selfish, desperate boy. Yes, I said, because houses can be rebuilt. But sons... My voice cracked, but I steadied it. Sons can't. For a long moment, the room was nothing but breath. Then Winters nodded to his men. They released Jordan, shoving him forward. He stumbled, nearly fell, but I caught him, my arms wrapping around him like when he was 5 and scraped his knees on the sidewalk. He clung to me, whispering, I'm sorry, Ma. I'm so sorry. I pressed the ledger into Winters's hands. He smiled, cold, victorious. But before he could tuck it away, Saint spoke. You forgot one thing, Charles, he said, his voice low but sharp. When you step into Brooklyn, you play by Brooklyn's rules. And Celeste, she ain't just some mother clinging to a house. She's the woman who walked away from Lennox with her soul intact. You should have remembered who you were dealing with. Winter's eyes flickered, doubt slicing through his calm. Callahan shifted uneasily, her scarf slipping loose. The walls seemed to lean in, listening. My brownstone, my witness. Winters tucked the ledger under his arm, turned on his heel, and walked out without another word. His men followed. Callahan lingered a second, her gaze locking on me, something like respect or fear in her eyes. Then she left too. Silence fell heavy after the door shut. Saint stood, stretching. You bought your son back, Celeste, but you paid a steep price. That ledger won't stay buried now. You ready for what comes? I looked around my living room. At the piano Jordan never played anymore. At the rug covering the hatch. At the walls soaked in my family's prayers. I'm ready, I said. Saint nodded once, then slipped out into the night with his men. Jordan sat on the couch, head in his hands. Ma, he whispered, voice breaking. I ruined everything. I sat beside him, placed a hand on his back. No, I said softly. You reminded me what really matters. Houses fall, secrets rise. But family, we fight for family. He leaned into me, tears hot against my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry too, because I had lost something tonight. But I had kept something more. What we keep, what we let go, that's what defines us. And my name is Celeste Grant. I don't burn easy.